the clock because it is ticking, and with there's a couple of days to go, President Trump and Congress now racing to iron out an immigration deal and keep the government open for business. Two big items on the agenda as we say good morning. Midweek now on Wednesday. I'm Bill Hemmer, live inside of America's Newsroom. How you doing?
And here we go.
Better than ever, by the way. Yes, you are.
Beware of ice is my lesson of the morning. And I'm Sandra Smith. Thanks for joining us. Lawmakers working to hammer out a deal as both sides dig their heels in on their respective issues. Republicans want more border security and stricter immigration reform. Democrats want to protect those so-called dreamers. One thing's for sure, it will be another busy day in Washington.
You say that you wanted more people coming from Norway. Is that true, Mr. President?
I want them to come in from everywhere.
What he was referencing is, from a merit-based perspective, we'd like to have those with skills who can assimilate and contribute to the United States, moving away from country quotas and to an individual merit-based system.
This has turned into a S show, and we need to get back to being a great country, where Democrats and Republicans have worked together to do something that we should have done years ago.
The Republicans are in control of the House and the Senate and the White House. It is their decision as to whether they'll work with us to move forward.
We certainly don't want the government to shut down, but we'd still like to see a budget deal that is a 2-year budget deal, that is a clean budget deal. We haven't given up on that, and we hope that Democrats will not hold our government hostage and will not stop military spending.
Peter Ducey is live for us this morning on a chilly day in Washington. Peter, are Republicans even trying to win over Democratic support to keep the government open?
No, Sandra, they are trying to do it with Republicans only, and the leaders are attempting to sweeten this 1 month of additional government funding, the continuing resolution, by adding in 6 years worth of funding for the Children's Health Insurance Program and delaying Obamacare's medical device tax. But because they do not plan to touch DACA in the next couple days, some conservatives think their own leaders are laying the groundwork for an unfavorable immigration deal next month, and the House Freedom Caucus thinks they can block this bill.
We're not setting any demands for leadership. I will say, based on the number of no and undecided votes, there is not enough votes for a Republican-only bill that would reach a 218 threshold without convincing some of our members to switch their position from either undecided or no to yes.
This morning, the White House legislative director warned his colleagues on Capitol Hill that a shutdown would make them look bad, but at the same time, he seems to sympathize with their stance.
There is a sense that if Republicans control the House and the White House, they'll get blamed. But the reality is that Democrats, we need 60 votes in the United States Senate. The Democrats are the ones that have a lot of power here, and they are, as you say, holding the American people and the government hostage in order to get demands that they want on DACA.
But Democrats are already saying Republicans control every branch of government, so if they can't keep it open, it's their fault.
So,
Sandra.
Peter, would Democrats vote on this short-term bill if they could get DACA next month?
No, it doesn't sound like it. The House Democratic Whip, Steny Hoyer, is already saying that even if there's a short-term, couple-weeks-long government funding bill, he wants DACA attached. And the Senate Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, is already saying that they tried to negotiate an immigration bill with Republicans, but the president didn't like it.
It's not the bill we would have written if we were in charge. But that is not the situation we find ourselves in. To make this body work, to avoid a shutdown, we must compromise.
Republican lawmakers only have till Friday night to figure out how to keep the government open, and right now a meeting is beginning behind me across the street from the House office buildings to see where things stand this morning. Sandra?
That deadline quickly approaching. Peter Ducey, thank you. Meanwhile, the Justice Department now fighting back, asking the Supreme Court to review a lower court's DACA decision. Last week, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from denying work permits to applicants who entered the U.S. illegally when they were children. The administration is also appealing the ruling to the Court of Appeals at the same time as it asks the High Court to get involved.
5 minutes past, the former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon speaking with the House Intelligence Committee for a long time yesterday. And he's expected to go back for round 2 tomorrow. Meanwhile, that same panel will talk with Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski today. And South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, member of that committee, with a lot of questions to ask. Sir, good morning and welcome back to America's Newsroom.
Good morning. Thank you.
I heard you last night say that Steve Bannon was using a tortured version of executive privilege. Well, he was there for 12 hours. So, yeah, I imagine you talked about something.
Well, we spent the first half of the day trying to understand what in the world he was talking about with executive privilege. His version of executive privilege is it covers the transition, it covers the time he was at the White House, and it covers time in memorial. That is no one's definition of executive privilege. So we spent several hours trying to figure out just what the heck he was talking about. And then in the afternoon, we had to dodge around these 3 categories that are apparently off limits. Now, Bill, keep in mind, this is the same person who accused 2 of the president's family members of committing treasonous acts. So, of course, we're going to want to cross-examine him on what he thinks was treasonous. But if everything's off limits, that's a really short conversation.
So I take it you asked him about the treasonous comment and he did not answer it, right?
I tried to. Well, that's the beauty of it. He answered it initially, and then apparently his lawyer didn't like the fact that he answered it, so then he clammed up. That is an eminently reasonable, legitimate question. If you're going to accuse somebody of a crime for which you can be put to death, what is your evidence for that? So I don't know anyone who wouldn't ask that question. He started to answer it, and then his lawyers got involved, and that usually messes up almost everything, and that's why we were there for a long time yesterday, but we're going to have to go back tomorrow.
You sound frustrated. Do I have that right?
I am frustrated whenever people assert privileges that do not exist. And I am really frustrated when witnesses have all the time in the world to talk to the media on and off the record, and they can help people write books, but they can't talk to the representatives that are elected by their fellow citizens. I mean, picture that. He's happy to tell an author about treasonous, unpatriotic acts, but he won't tell members of Congress when he's pressed on it. I'm not aware of any privilege that lets you pick and choose who you answer questions for.
I understand the point you're making, and any reason to expect there's a difference tomorrow. Now, did you settle any ground rules late yesterday that would indicate that would be different on Thursday?
Bill, there's one thing that can fix it, which is the White House instructs Steve Bannon, we're not asserting executive privilege. We are telling you to answer all of the questions that Congress has. That could fix it in a nanosecond.
Yeah.
If the White House would say, answer their questions, Steve.
Have you found evidence of collusion?
No, sir. But we're not through yet. And some of my colleagues have already made up their minds, namely Adam Schiff. He found collusion before we even started. So I'm not sure how you do that, but he did it. I have seen no evidence of collusion between the president and the Russians, the president's campaign and the Russians. But we still have more interviews to do.
Okay, 2 more questions here. Corey Lewandowski appears today. Do you expect him to have the same posture as Steve Bannon?
I hope not. I hope not. It would be all we're doing is delaying. I mean, keep in mind the president and some of his supporters want Congress to hurry up and conclude these investigations. So do I. The best way to do that is to instruct witnesses to answer our questions instead of going through this charade of executive privilege.
Jim Rybecki appears tomorrow. Who is he, and why is he important?
He's a high-level FBI official who served under Jim Comey and currently serves, and we are looking at all the decisions the Department of Justice and the FBI made in 2016, and he's an integral part of that. I mean, keep in mind, Bill, this time last year, the Democrats wanted Jim Comey prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation. They now want him canonized or on Mount Rushmore, but this time last year, they wanted him prosecuted. So Republicans and Democrats have questions about decisions made by the Department of Justice in 2016. It's just the Democrats have stopped asking their questions and we have not.
Was Rybecki part of reporting or drafting the letter that exonerated Hillary Clinton? Was
He's
he part of
copied
that?
on it. He's copied on it, and the only way to know whether or not he played a meaningful role in drafting it is to interview him, which is what we're going to do tomorrow. But he was certainly copied on the drafts, so we need to know, did you participate in the editing, and is there also a prosecution version of that memo? We've seen the exoneration version. Two months before they concluded the investigation. Is there also a separate memo where you lay out the theory upon which she could be prosecuted? Because if there's not, and I don't think there is, then you made up your mind 2 months before you even interviewed the target of the investigation, which is really hard to believe.
Trey Gowdy, thank you for your time. Get back to work there in Washington,
yes,
okay?
Sir.
You're welcome. Come back here anytime. The Republican from South Carolina, thank you. One of his big allegations last night, if you saw Trey Gowdy with Tucker, was he thinks Democrats are dragging it out when it extended past November, and he also believes that the media is partly responsible for this. So we're going to debate all this coming up over the next couple of hours here. But there's Trey Gowdy today.
All right. Well, a stunning new report now revealing that 3 out of the 4 people convicted for terrorism in the U.S. have been foreign-born.
In 2017 alone, DHS had 2,554 encounters with individuals on the terrorist watch list who were attempting to travel to the United States. That equates to 7 terrorists a day, 50 a week.
President Trump seizing on that report as a reason that Democrats must come to the table and tighten our immigration program. Senator Mike Lee joins us on that and much more. Plus, did you catch this yesterday?
Explain to me how a guy who eats McDonald's and fried chicks and all those Diet Cokes and who never exercises is in as good a shape as you say he's in. It's called genetics.
This was a supersized report. White House doctor getting hammered by reporters for about an hour after giving the president an excellent bill of health. Are some media outlets now going out of their way to discredit his health and the president? We'll debate that and play more from that press conference as of yesterday. Also.
And breaking news on the search for answers on 2 deadly collisions at sea. Why 2 top commanders could face criminal charges later today. A lawyer for Las Vegas police did not identify any new evidence or suspects, but he did tell a judge that charges may be possible depending on the results of an ongoing investigation. Stephen Paddock killed 58 concert goers and injured more than 500 before turning the gun on himself back in October.
3 out of 4 individuals convicted in this country of international terrorism-related charges in the last 15 years were foreign-born. This report, unfortunately, is likely just the tip of the iceberg.
There you have Homeland Security Secretary on Capitol Hill yesterday pointing out the findings in a recent report, making the point about terrorism here in the U.S. as it relates to immigration. Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee with me now. And sir, good day to you. A couple of topics to get to, so thank you for your time. Well, what do you think that does to the argument that the president's making about chain migration and ending the visa lottery and programs like that? Well, they've been law for years now, sir.
Yeah, I certainly think it's worth considering in the context of a discussion focusing on who we're wanting to bring into this country. When we look at our immigration laws moving forward, who are the people who are most likely to fit into the United States, who are most likely to become citizens who will contribute to the American experience, who share our commitment to the rule of law? These are things that are worth considering, and a merit-based immigration system is definitely something that will be under discussion.
Do you think a deal on DACA is to be made with this Congress?
Yeah, I think something is likely to happen in this area. The trick here is to find something that makes sure that we bring about an end to the underlying problem. We want to fix it in the sense that we don't want people to be punished for having been brought here years or decades ago when they were children, and sometimes, in some cases, when they were infants by no choice of their own. At the same time, we want to make sure that we fix it in a way that doesn't encourage more people to do the same thing in the future, leading to further victimization of the most vulnerable group of immigrants in this country. Right. So I think a deal is to be had, but I think we've got to deal with it in a way that addresses border security and that also deals with our aging visa system that's out of date and needs to be updated.
Well, a lot of work going ahead for you, but I think a lot of people in the middle see a deal to be had there, and well, let's see, frankly, whether or not you can get there. Okay, now, you were a no vote late last night on the FISA law, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, that's Section 702. You've been railing against this idea for a long time, and you're still a no vote, despite the changes and the reforms they made in the law. How come, Senator?
I voted against bringing debate to a close last night because they haven't brought about adequate changes to Section 702. Now, neither I nor Senator Paul nor Senator Wyden or Senator Leahy or any of the others who voted no last night will want to end Section 702. That's not what this is about. What we want to make sure is that it can't be abused, that it can't be used to bring about illegal backdoor searches on American citizens. Right now, and as the law has been amended in this most recent iteration, it's got a loophole in it through which you could drive a Mack truck and a 747 and an Airbus A380. This is not an adequate protection for the American people who don't want to have their own government spying on them.
You mentioned abuse. Do you believe this law has been abused? And what example would you give?
I believe that it's entirely possible that it could be abused. I have no proof of any particular instance in which it has happened. There are those who think it may have. My point is that we know that at some point in the future it will be abused if we don't put adequate protections in place. Well, remember, there was a body in the Senate a few decades ago that concluded that in every presidential administration from FDR all the way through Nixon, about the time this review was conducted, intelligence gathering agencies had been used to engage in political espionage. We know that these things happen. We've got to make sure that our laws are as tight as possible so that they don't happen as often as they would otherwise.
Now, Senator Rand Paul used two examples. He suggests that perhaps in the future the government could use this database if you violate paying your own taxes or if you're in violation of a minor marijuana charge. Do you see those two examples as practical concerns that everyday Americans should have about their own security and privacy?
Look, I think every American is concerned about their privacy. Every American certainly ought to be concerned about the fact that someone could be targeted on the basis of unpopular political beliefs at some point in the future. This is a reason why we have a Fourth Amendment. It's one of the reasons why we're a country, why we don't fly the Union Jack, is that we believe in privacy, and we believe that our privacy is not at odds with our security. In fact, our security and our privacy are part of the same thing.
Well, Senator, one last thing here. Fewer Americans will be caught up in searches. That's what the proponents of the law say are changing now. And also they're saying it requires reforms the way intelligence services collect the contents and how they store that electronic information. Clearly, that's not good enough for you.
No, it's not. I mean, look, some of these protections apply only with respect to a case where there is a predicated investigation. There are many stages of investigations at which those restrictions wouldn't apply. And so that's why I say this creates a loophole that's a mile wide. And there are reforms that would still protect the American people from those who want to harm us. But those reforms didn't even have a chance to be voted on, and I think that's unfortunate.
Senator, thank you. I hope you come on back, okay? Mike Lee's a Republican from Utah. I know you've been hot on this issue for some time, though. Thank you for sharing some time with us today.
Thank you, Bill.
You bet. Sandra.
A former CIA agent charged for spying for China. He's accused of leaking top secret information, including the real names of undercover agents. How the Department of Justice uncovered his crime.
Also, President Trump calling for more border security. There's already a big challenge on that plan. We'll tell you what's behind a manpower crisis at the Border Patrol Agency.
It doesn't matter why they crossed or for what purpose they came here. What they did was illegal, and we're paid to uphold the law.
I wanted to sell my house, but didn't want people parading through it. So I called Homevestors, the We Buy Ugly Houses people.
Died when the USS McCain collided with an oil tanker in August, and 7 others are killed on the USS Fitzgerald when it hit a commercial ship in June. The former commanders of both vessels, Bryce Benson and Alfredo Sanchez, are being charged with negligent homicide.
A former CIA officer now under arrest. He's been accused of illegally retaining classified information and reportedly leaking that information to China. Doug McKelway joins us live from Washington. It appears, Doug, the Bureau has been tracking this former agent for a number of years now.
That's right, Sandra. Their investigation of 53-year-old Jerry Chun-Shing Lee began as early as 2012, 6 years ago. It was then that the CIA retiree had traveled back to the United States and to Virginia from his home in Hong Kong with a 3-day stopover in Honolulu. In Hawaii and in Virginia, FBI agents armed with search warrants entered his hotel rooms, searched through his suitcases, and photographed 2 small notebooks with 49 pages of handwritten entries that contained classified and even top secret information, including the locations, telephone numbers, and real names of CIA informants and undercover agents operating in China. It was the same information that Chun-Shing Lee was privy to before he retired from the CIA in 2007. It appears that that information was provided to Chinese authorities, who then began the process of disassembling the CIA's U.S. Human Intelligence Network in China. The New York Times today said, quote, The collapse of the spy network was one of the American government's worst intelligence failures in recent years. Chun-Shing Lee was arrested on Monday at Kennedy Airport in New York. He made his first appearance in Brooklyn federal court Tuesday and is now awaiting transfer to federal court in Virginia. Sandra?
Doug, why did authorities wait so long to arrest this retired CIA agent when they knew what he was up to 6 years ago?
You know, that's a question for former CIA Director John Brennan, who was in charge of the agency at the time this was going on. We can only speculate. It may be that the damage was done by the time the CIA began to see its undercover operations in China fall apart. It may be that once compromised, they trailed Chun-Shing Lee in an effort to find out who his contacts were so as to infiltrate his operation. But we also know that he knew that he was being trailed. The FBI interviewed him on 5 occasions between May and June of 2013, during which he never acknowledged possession of the notebooks with all that classified information. Sandra?
All right, Doug McKelway, thank you.
There are disturbing new details emerging from inside a home in Southern California. What police are now saying about what they found when they arrived at the scene there. Plus, there is this today.
Data indicates that the president is currently very healthy and that he will remain so for the duration of his presidency.
The White House doctor telling reporters the president is in excellent health, but many of them not accepting his diagnosis. Our panel takes up the debate. But first, here's Eric Trump on his father's health.
Think about the question, does he eat ice cream? I mean, this is insane. Like, where is the coverage of the economy at 26,000? Where is the coverage of unemployment being the lowest ever?
If you have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis,
Provided evidence to police of the conditions inside that home. She and her 12 siblings would still be suffering. Police finding the home was used by the parents of 13. A social service director applauding that girl's bravery just yesterday. Listen.
I am immensely grateful for the young child being willing to make that call to 911. Otherwise, we would not have had the opportunity to intervene. And we want to highlight the importance the community plays in providing us with information about abuse and neglect.
As police continue to sift through that evidence, the parents, shown here, David and Louise Turpin, remain in jail on $9 million bail, facing charges of torture and child endangerment.
President Donald Trump getting a clean bill of health from the White House doctor. Mr. Trump even taking an unrequired cognitive exam, which he also passed. But that was not good enough for all those reporters in the room who continued to grill the doctor for an hour during a Q&A session. Listen.
He continues to enjoy the significant long-term cardiac and overall health benefits that come from a lifetime of abstinence from tobacco and alcohol. We discussed diet, exercise, and weight loss. He would benefit from a diet that is lower in fat and carbohydrates and from a routine exercise regimen. Data indicates that the president is currently very healthy and that he will remain so for the duration of his presidency.
Can you assess the president's mental fitness for office?
An incident recently where the president appeared to slur his words while giving an address. Did you look into what the cause of that might have been at all?
He would be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency. Do you agree with that assessment?
How a guy who eats McDonald's and fried chicken and all those Diet Cokes and who never exercises is in as good a shape as you say he's in.
Let's bring in our panel. Dr. Mark Siegel is a professor of medicine for the NYU Langone Medical Center and a Fox News contributor. Brad Blakeman is a former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. And Richard Fowler is a radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. We'll start with the doctor first. I heard you sighing as you heard those questions from reporters. Here, a doctor stood up, the White House doctor, gave the president a clean bill of health, but they were relentless with their questions.
First of all, Dr. Jackson is incredibly credentialed. He's an emergency room physician. He served in Iraq. He served at a trauma unit in Iraq. He was President Obama's doctor. He worked with President Bush as well. He's as nonpartisan as they come. He talked for an hour and then all of these questions. He said his heart is in great shape. He had an extensive stress test, an echocardiogram, a CAT scan of the chest. He actually submitted to a very extensive cognitive test called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test. That
the president volunteered himself for that. that
scored
test.
30 out of 30 at the age of 71, which I do not think I could do. And then the most important thing of all, the psychiatric assessment, the doctor gave a very smart answer to that. He said, I spend almost every day with the president. Sandra, you know how you assess psychiatric behavior? By spending time with someone. It's not really something you can test. So he put his own reputation on the line here. And I think that he did, I think the media is doing a real disservice here to people with real mental illness and real cognitive issues and real dementia by targeting the president and making it seem like it's a diminishment of some kind.
And I know you have a piece in USA Today, an op-ed on just that, your concerns as far as that. But Brad, when you looked at members of the media in that room yesterday, almost an hour long those questions went. The president did say, the White House said that the president said go out there, answer all their questions. But it appeared the members of the media were disappointed at what they found.
There's no doubt. They looked absolutely perplexed and beside themselves, and were peppering the doctor for an hour with questions. Are you sure he's okay? Are these levels correct? Did the president tell you to say anything that you shouldn't say to us? Are you prohibited from reporting things? The doctor laid it all out, and I'll tell you, after working for several presidents, this is unprecedented. Usually a one-page document, and at best is turned out to the media after the presidential physical, and it's very generic. It's the president is in good health, and he'll have another exam next year. The fact that they went before the cameras and answered every question to exhaustion to a dissatisfied press corps is really something and telling, and the doctor hit it right on the head. This isn't the kind of thing that the president should have to go through.
Richard, most of those reporters seemed upset they weren't able to get anything on this president. Was this a good strategy for President Trump?
I think it was a good strategy for the president to do a drop-dead press conference by his doctor and answer every question possible about the president's health. Really puts this issue to bed. Does it mean that he's going to stop tweeting? No. Does it mean he's going to stop acting erratic? Probably not. But it does say that he's in good health, even though he needs to sort of ease off the cheeseburgers and the Diet Cokes. But I think this was definitely a good move by the White House. And this is a bright spot in what has been a really, really, really bad weekend and an overall bad week for the president, given what he said in the Oval Office last week Friday, given that there's a likely government shutdown coming at the end of this week. So the president gets a good mark for this particular performance.
It's really interesting, Doctor, because in your piece, you actually go on to say that the president, just based on his history, lack of alcohol use, cigarette smoking, vigor on the golf course, could have predicted the outcome of this medical testing.
Add to that low blood pressure. And I also think it's a moment of great hope for Americans out there who maybe don't exercise enough, who maybe don't eat right. You can still improve. You can still, which is what Dr. Jackson said President Trump should do. Start walking that golf course now. Get rid of the golf cart. Start exercising regularly. Lose some weight. Improve your diet. Because already with your genetics, your low blood pressure, your low cholesterol, which you can bring down further, and again, not smoking and not drinking, you're already ahead of the curve. Now, the last two presidents, Sandra, exercised vigorously. They were role models for exercise and fitness. President Trump can still do that. In the meantime, for those couch potatoes out there, this is a good moment.
I do believe he was also asked in that room yesterday, Brad, by one of the reporters. The doctor was asked, so is he the healthiest president ever to live? The doctor declined to compare him to any previous president's health. But does this put the issue over the president's health to rest, Brad?
It should. This exhaustive report on the president, including diagnostics, should absolutely put it to bed. And if anything, I would challenge any reporter in that room to take the same kind of test that the president went through, even half his age, and try and get the kind of scores this president did. And if I were the president today, I would take the entire press corps to McDonald's and have a full Big Mac, supersized meal as a thank you for their behavior yesterday.
The only thing I will add to that, Sandra, is the reason why I think the press corps was chomping at the bit was because his other doctor, when he was running for office, sort of released this glittery letter talking about he is the healthiest person and he's the healthiest president that ever lived, which is why people in the press corps sort of gave this health report a side eye. Now they no longer have to do that because a doctor who's well credentialed has said that the president's healthy. Now we can now focus on the fact that he tweets too much and he drinks too many Diet Cokes.
So, Doctor, I'll leave this with you. So put this to rest. Is there anything you learned yesterday in the report, both on the cognitive side and the physical side of this president? Anything anything left that concerns you?
He needs a little more vitamin D. He's got to increase his Crestor to lower his cholesterol further. I want him to exercise. But what I learned most disturbingly yesterday was you have this physician trained in Iraq, in the Iraq theater. There's nobody that you could point to that's more credentialed to be doing this, and he's grilled for over an hour. That was deeply disturbing, and it's time for the media to cut that out. This is an embarrassing moment for the news media.
My goodness. All right, good discussion, guys. Thanks to all of you for being here.
I like Brad's idea.
Yeah.
Straight to KFC we go.
Yes.
Original recipe. Side biscuit. All right, now the markets are open. We are in rarefied air. Check it out. 940 in New York, and the Dow hitting 26,000 yesterday. So what about today, and how long can this last? We'll check that out with Marie in a moment. Plus, there is this today.
A shootout with police in Baltimore caught on camera and showing what our brave men and women in blue deal with in the field. What led to this firefight.
That is remarkable. Also, disgraced doctor Larry Nassar accused of sexual abuse by more than 100 young girls. Among them, several gold medal Olympians, and we're hearing from some of the victims who are now speaking out in court about their case.
Perhaps you have figured it out by now, but little girls don't stay little forever. They grow into strong women that return to destroy your world.
America's top critics are raving. Hostiles is one of the best films of the year. Christian Bale is astounding.
Abuse at the hands of USA Gymnastics team Dr. Larry Nassar ahead of his sentencing. Nassar pleaded guilty in November to 7 counts of criminal sexual misconduct, and now some of those girls are testifying against him.
I've looked into my parents' hardened eyes, seeing their pain from now knowing that their only child was molested right in front of them in the same room.
I listened to you tell me no one should ever do that, and if they do, you should tell someone. Well, Larry, I'm here, not to tell someone, but to tell everyone.
Olympic gymnasts Simone Biles, Allie Reisman, and Gabby Douglas are among the accusers. So is Michaela Maroney. She signed a non-disclosure agreement with USA Gymnastics, but the organization says it'll waive a $100,000 fine if she wants to speak at Nassar's sentencing.
That is remarkable to listen to. Wow, so stocks are up this morning. Check it out on Wall Street, 15 minutes of trading, and we are back yet again, knocking on the door at 26,000 for the Dow, surging yesterday for the first time, and what we call rarefied financial air. Closed below, though, that mark, dropped about 300 points before the close. Maria Bartiromo, host of Mornings with Maria, Sunday Morning Futures. How you doing, Maria? Good morning to you.
Great to see you.
Here's what I want to know. Okay. All right, we're going pop, 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 pop. What stops this bull run?
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum in the markets, obviously, Bill. But you know what? I think when you see a decline that you saw yesterday, you have to respect that kind of a decline. You have to say, okay, what changed here? What's going on? Why did we drop so precipitously at the end of the day? It could be that 26,000 is representing some resistance for this market. And there's no question that this market has been going nowhere but straight up now since the election. So you would expect to see some pullback at some point. I would not be surprised to see this market back and fill a little. In other words, go up toward 26,000, come back. Go up, come back. Well, because we need more evidence now that the growth is there in terms of earnings and in terms of what this tax bill is going to provide.
That's a great point. The tax bill and the earnings, all that, too. There is the threat of a government shutdown.
Yeah.
I mean, historically, that really is a drag on the markets. I assume they're listening on that.
That's
and
right.
So, too, is Washington.
When you have resistance and a feeling that this market has gone up as much as it has, people look for excuses. The government shutdown may very well be one excuse to sell. Another excuse to sell, and I think this is important for our viewers to keep an eye on, there's a lot of supply coming to this market. In other words, the capital markets, there's action once again. There's going to be M&A, mergers and acquisitions. There's going to be IPOs, a couple of secondary offerings. When you get more supply, more deals coming to market, and you don't have any more demand, supply demand, pretty easy stuff. So you also want to look at the supply coming to the market. But this government shutdown, if we were to see it, that's a perfect excuse to say, you know what, I've made $7.5 trillion since the election. Let me take some chips off the table.
I got it. So we'll watch that. Also watch this, and that's jobs and unemployment. The president was touting minority employment in America today. He said this yesterday.
Black unemployment is the best it's ever been in recorded history. It's been fantastic, and it's the best number we've had with respect to black unemployment. We've never seen anything even close, so we're very honored by that. And our country is doing very well.
So we took that comment and we did our own research. Here's what we found on screen. Unemployment statistics for 2017, December, 6.8% for African Americans. Hispanics, same month, same year, 4.9%.
Wow.
That's low.
These are very good numbers, Bill, and it is an indication of what's really going on in the economy. And by the way, when you look at markets, what's driving markets really are the fundamentals. So as long as we do have a fundamental story in place, like the lowest level of black unemployment that we've seen in so long, like job creation, 2 million over the last year, you're going to continue to see profits rise, and that's going to be a pretty good bid under the market. So even if we were to see a decline, like I said, there is some resistance here, longer term, you look at things like what you just showed, that minority unemployment, job creation in general, earnings growth, that ultimately supports longer-term stocks. We are right now in the middle of the fourth quarter earnings season, and before this tax legislation passed, people were looking for growth in earnings of 11% for 2018. Because of the tax plan, they're adding on another 12%.
Wow.
So we're looking at a story in 2018 of earnings growth of 23%, Bill. That's very positive.
Incredible. General Motors came out with a lot of good news yesterday as well about what they think can be forecast for the next 2 years' time.
The auto sector's doing very well.
You know, I think about that unemployment number, and I think about, supply and demand that you talk about, and you talk about immigration reform and the need for labor in America, because I'm starting to hear these, construction companies say, you know what, we're looking for employees. And I think the danger there is that could undercut a lot of this growth right now if you need to pay employees a lot more money, because that's going to drive up costs.
That's a very good point, and that's exactly the conversation that we're going to be having over the next year. Inflation and wages. How hot is too hot?
26,000. It's pretty hot for now. Thank you, Maria. See you tomorrow morning, okay,
right,
in Fox Business.
Thanks.
Okay. Here's Sandra.
Sure is. All right. Well, Ann Curry giving her first sit-down interview since leaving NBC. What she is saying about her former Today Show co-host, Matt Lauer, and the accusations that led him to be fired.
Also, President Trump wanted to beef up border security, you know that, but the agency that patrols the border is finding it tough to keep people on the job. Why is that? Live report coming up to answer that question next.
At the end of the day, from my perspective, I would rather the jump seat next to me be empty than have an individual that's potentially corrupt.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need?